7 pitches today, and we're going to end up on a ledge that's big enough for us to sleep on. But there are places that are blank and steep for such long periods that they originally hung in hammocks, old-fashioned hammocks on the wall. But it's not like hanging between 2 trees, because a lot of times you would be hanging against the wall. So not very comfortable. So eventually somebody developed what are called portaledges, which are like the old army cots that fold out and you pop the ends on them, and then you have a rigid canvas ledge that you can lay on. Well, a portaledge is a nylon ledge that folds out and pops together like that, but there's no floor for the legs to go to. So instead it has straps that go to the wall at a single point. So here's this big nylon ledge, and then you have all of these nylon straps that go up to a single point. And eventually they developed tents that hung over those portaledges. So we'll just be hanging on a vertical wall and establish this anchor and put this ledge together and sleep on this big cot, basically.
I assume you're not a restless sleeper, though.
You do roll around some, and we stayed,
you have to stay tied in.
Yeah, we stayed tied into the wall, and that benefited me greatly on a climb called the Pacific Ocean Wall, because I could not get this ledge, just the way that the rock undulated and curved right there. I could not get this ledge to hang flat against the wall. And so I finally got tired of fighting with it, and you've been hanging on this wall all day, you're pretty exhausted. And so I finally climbed into this ledge without it being perfectly set up. But I'm still wearing my harness, I'm still tied into the wall. So eventually, in the middle of the night, that ledge slipped and spit me out the end of it. And so it's pitch black out, and I'm in the middle of El Capitan, and I'm shooting out the bottom of this ledge. And what I did not have was my sleeping bag clipped to the rest of my gear. So here it is, pitch black, and I can just feel the sleeping bag shooting off of my legs. And I had coming out of a dead sleep, I had the presence of mind to spread my feet, so I caught the sleeping bag before it could go off into outer space.
And are you tied in at only one point or multiple points?
Multiple points.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, we established really good anchors.
I hope so. Yeah. Wow. So after that, you decided to go into the military.
We were trying to put together an expedition to some pretty extreme peaks in Peru, and there were some guys with more high alpine experience than myself, but we needed to be good rock climbers because we wanted to do these things in the Andes that had rock towers on them and stuff. So we were working on putting this expedition together, and a number of things happened that made that expedition fall through. And these days, with social media and filming and videos and documentaries and stuff, it seems like it's easier for high-level climbers to cobble a career together these days. But back then, it was almost impossible if you weren't guiding people day in and day out, and people that you didn't necessarily have a lot in common with or even like. So I did not want to be a full-time guide. But anyway, this expedition fell through, and it created a sort of a personal crisis for me, and there was a humongous military history in my family, my dad, my uncles, my grandfathers, and I did not want to go to college. I didn't have the money or the desire to go to college. So joining the military seemed like a sportier thing to do. And so in 1982, I joined the Air Force. And I was actually headed for a technical electronics school, but while I was at basic training, I found out about the Global Survival School. And so I went to a briefing where they were recruiting guys for the upcoming survival instructor class. And as soon as I saw some of the slides they put up with camouflage and escape and evasion and parachuting and
climbing,
snow caves, and eventually all of a sudden here pops up a climbing slide, and I was like, oh, I'm done. That's where I'm, that's where I'm going. And my drill instructor tried to talk me out of it. I remember him saying, "Why do you want to go be one of those jump, die, kill heroes?" And he said, "You know, they wash 50% of the guys out of that school." And I said, "That's okay. I'm not in that 50%." You know, I was pretty confident I was already an El Cap climber by that point. So I knew that that's where I belonged. And that photograph is of the old World War II barracks at the Air Force Survival School. And so those buildings, most of those buildings are not even there anymore. There is still a school there, but there's modern buildings now. And so, yeah.
Are those World War II era buildings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chow Hall, everything is there. It's almost a separate little base from Fairchild Air Force Base. Fairchild Air Force Base is a big B-52 base, and but the survival school has a mock POW camp in it, and so it can't be on the main base. We had our own little base off to the side. So that's what all that is.
So you were not one of the 50%, obviously, that washed out.
No, as a matter of fact, I won 2 out of the 4 awards given to that class.
Good man. Good man. That's great. So you're now training other military folks who are going into dangerous areas about the what-if scenarios.
Because the Army Air Corps, which became the Air Force, in World War II, they realized that they had young men from Alabama that were flying over Greenland. They had young men from Alaska that were flying over Borneo, very strange environments for these people. And they knew that they had to create a global-oriented survival school. So we were teaching all air crews, bomber pilots, load masters, fighter jocks, anybody that flew around in Air Force planes, we trained.
And give an idea of some of the training that you did for them.
We had an on-base segment of training, which was academics, on-base parachute training, on-base water survival. We had an exhibits lab, which is like a survival museum that we walked them through, and it had jungle displays and desert displays and Arctic displays, because we're going to take these people, all of these millions of dollars worth of pilots, up into the mountains and train them in the woods and the snow and stuff like that. But we can't take them to every global environment. They took us to deserts and jungles and oceans and stuff, but we couldn't do that with every 3-week cycle of students that we put up with. So they got a lot of their globally oriented training.
Wait a minute. So I'm getting trained for just 3 weeks on how to survive?
No, the survival instructor course, it takes a year for me to become certified.
No, but I'm talking about the people you're instructing is 3 weeks.
Yes.
And then see you later.
Yep.
Okay.
And that includes escape and evasion, camouflage, navigation, food procurement, signaling, search and rescue.
Wow.
It's pretty intense.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a good school.
And so then you left the military.
Right at the time that I was getting ready to get out, there was a change at the survival school in Saudi Arabia. Northrop lost the F-5 technical support contract at this base in eastern Saudi Arabia. And so and everybody that worked there was ex-Air Force global survival instructors. But there were some of those guys who were not willing to take a pay cut. So the new company was not offering the same money that Northrop had paid them. The new company was called Lear Sigler. And so that created a bunch of openings for myself and some guys I was in the service with to go to Saudi Arabia and we were civilian contractors, but it was still a military survival school. And so I taught in Saudi Arabia for 4 years. And we didn't just teach Saudi pilots, we taught Jordanians and Bahrainis and Kuwaitis and United Arab Emirates pilots. And so it was pretty international situation.
And when we think of Saudi Arabia, we think of deserts and stuff, but there's mountains to climb there, right?
Right. Not in the eastern province where I was. It is very sand dune, hot, humid desert on the Persian Gulf side. But on the Red Sea side of the country, there are high peaks. There's 9,000-foot mountains over there. And so we got to go over there on vacation, basically, and we climbed on rock walls that I was sure no human had ever touched before.
Yeah.
We had baboons hanging out on the cliff next to us, watching us climb. I think there's a photograph at some point in here of Saudi Arabia, but so this is that picture that you just saw was Half Dome on the left, and that red line was the first big wall technical route on Half Dome. That's the regular northwest face of Half Dome, and then to the right of that is next to that humongous black streak that you see in the middle is another climb called the direct northwest face of Half Dome. And I did not want to do, the regular route which you see in red there is kind of known as the trade route. That's what people do for their first big wall climb on Half Dome. And I was convinced that I did not want to do that. I wanted to do something more difficult, more direct. The straightest line up the wall was very attractive to me. So I actually did the direct northwest face of Half Dome first, and I didn't climb the regular route until many years later. And this photograph is on El Capitan. This is on a route called the Shield. The El Capitan is basically divided into the southeast face, which goes to the right, and the southwest face, which goes to the left. This is on the southwest face, and this climb leads up, is called the Shield because you climb up to what is essentially a giant granite bubble sticking off the side of El Capitan. And so we did a lot of free climbing on it, but there's also lots of direct aid, which is what you see here. That's, placing nuts or pitons into the cracks and hanging nylon slings from that gear that we can put our feet in, and that's how we move from one piece of equipment to the next. So I can climb 150 feet of technical granite without hanging on with my hands and feet. In this case, I'm dealing completely with the equipment, not free climbing the stone itself.
Great. Yeah, let's go through some of these rather quickly, because then I want to get to the subject of your talk today, which is the definition of adventure, which we all discuss here. So what's this
So
slide?
this slide is showing that giant granite bubble. It feels like you're climbing on the outside of a hot air granite balloon. It's just so huge and so blank and so exposed. And the rock curves away from us in every direction, so these are just tiny little cracks going up this huge expanse of, it's like being on a vertical granite ocean, it feels like. And so it's technical climbing, and this is also direct aid, it's not free climbing. So the lead rope is attached to the rock, and the other rope you see hanging in the photograph is the haul line. So that's what all the big torpedo bags of equipment come up on that second rope.
Let's go ahead. Next one.
Yeah, this is also on the Shield. So you see the lower wall of El Capitan. We were talking about climbing up to the heart. Was it Greg that I met? We were talking about him climbing up to the heart area. This is, the heart area is below where I am now. So we climbed up past that, and then you end up going over this big overhang, and now, once again, this is hanging on the side of that shield formation up there. And the next slide is also direct aid climbing on the shield. Beautiful, beautiful, just amazing granite formation. And we had some good flat ledges to sleep on. We didn't have to hang in portaledges or hammocks on this climb. We managed to make it to a flat granite ledge every night while we were on this climb. This particular climb took us 4 days, I think. So we spent 3 nights on the wall in this case. And this is climbing from a place called Gray Ledges. This is part of the route that takes us up to the shield. But those, what you see down in the distance, those are full-grown pine trees down there.
You're way up.
When you're 2,000 feet off the ground, it starts to look like a green shag carpet down there. And this photograph is what's called El Cap Towers. It's a famous formation near the nose of El Capitan, and we had already climbed the nose of El Capitan. So when we did the third ascent of a climb called Tribal Right, we actually climbed those huge corners that you're seeing in that photo there. So. And you can see those big ledges up at the top of those towers. Those are some of the biggest sleeping ledges on El Capitan. They're very big, flat, comfortable places. You can walk around on them. Wow. They're so big.
Wow.
And this is climbing in those big corners. That's why I put these two pictures together, because this is this particular part of that climb is called New Dawn, and this was typically an aid crack here, and I did as much of it as I could free climbing. So in this case, I'm not hanging on the equipment. In this case, I'm hanging on to the crack. Beautiful climbing. And this is one of those big ledges at the top of that formation, and there must be, I don't know, 6 or 8 ledges up there total. And this is just one of the biggest ledges on top of those towers. So you can see there's multiple anchors in the wall, and we have completely flat, comfortable places to hang out. Not comfortable places to sleep, really, but this is this particular slide is on top of a climb called Excalibur, one of the last climbs that I did on El Capitan. And that is just climbing gear in my lap. All carabiners, pitons, camming devices, hexcentric stoppers. This slide is on a climb called Lurking Fear, which is way over on the west side of El Capitan. And if we weren't, this climb suited me perfectly for free climbing, but I was, you're tired, you're dehydrated, and you have all of this extra gear hanging on you, all this aid climbing equipment that's hanging on you. So trying to figure out how to free climb some of these places is just too difficult and too exhausting and too time consuming. So it's actually just in terms of just getting up the wall successfully, sometimes we just resort to aid climbing. And so this is nice, clean, safe aid climbing. And I was wishing that I was lighter, I had less stuff hanging on me, and I would have free climbed that crack. That's the way I felt about it at the time.
I always wish I was lighter.
Yeah. This is another photograph of hanging on the side of the shield. My partner took that when we were close to being together at an anchor on the shield, and he said, just look down for a minute. So, yeah. And this is on the southeast face of El Capitan. This is on a climb called the North America Wall, which climbs a different kind of granite. This is like black diorite instead of pure white or gold granite. It's dark. It's more brittle, it's scarier in a way, and there's a humongous overhang at the top of this giant corner. You climb up this corner for hundreds of feet, and then at the top of it there's this monstrous overhang that sticks out 40 feet in space, and I had to climb over that overhang on aid climbing equipment, and then when I got out to the lip of that roof, I peered back under at my partners who were hanging on the wall 40 feet back under this giant overhang, and one of my partners took a picture of me peeking back over that overhang. And that is a portaledge. We were talking about portaledges. So it's like a giant army cot, except it hangs on the side of a vertical wall. So that's where we sleep. And that's what spit me out in the middle of the night.
That's amazing.
And this is part of the nose of El Capitan, which was my first climb on El Cap, and it took, I forget, in 1953, I think it took Warren Harding and his friends, they spread it out. It took them a couple of years. It was like 50 days of climbing spread over a couple of years for them to even get up it. And then eventually, you know, people are doing it speed ascent style now. But that's Lynn Hill right there in that photograph.
That's great.
She is one of the most amazing. She's the first human being to free climb the nose of El Capitan.
Yeah. Let's keep that picture.
The hill, by the way, was paid by Patagonia and Black Diamond to be an ambassador and promote the equipment.
Yeah.
That's one way she earned her money.
Right, yeah. Well, gear sponsorship, yeah, climbers do a lot to try to keep climbing.
But let's freeze this photo here because I want to get to people to ask questions, but also defining adventure, because you said to me you've always loved easy climbing and that you did not mind helping beginners because of what adventure means to you, and I'd like you to elaborate on that.
Well, I know people who did sports at very high levels, and as soon as they could not achieve their highest level anymore, their interest in the sport waned, you know. And for me, because I started out with this slow apprenticeship, I spent a lot of times on easier climbs just trying to keep myself alive. So it was always enjoyable to me, and I loved teaching people how to climb. So when I was not doing my most extreme stuff anymore, it was not uncomfortable at all for me to continue to do easier climbs. You know, it's like I don't want the stress and the risk and the injuries of trying to climb at the highest level. I'll just take a step back and climb things that are a little bit easier and climb with people who are less experienced and teach people things. And also I was reflecting on this club and all of the kinds of people that have come through here. And I was thinking about, wow, I'm going to be talking to kayakers and skiers and deep water sailors, and so all of those things qualify as adventure. And as I got older, I just sort of redefined what I thought adventure was. You know, I have an old friend who I was hoping would be here tonight, who has been a professional musician all of his life, and he reached high-level recording with the Righteous Brothers and Redbone, and he never did a dangerous whitewater kayak. He never climbed the side of a big wall, but hearing him talk about growing up and the things that he had to do to pursue his musical dreams certainly sounded like adventure to me, you know. So, and what my folks did. My folks were not whitewater kayakers or hardcore skiers or rock climbers either, but I certainly consider them adventurers too.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. In a few words, how would you define adventure? If someone said to you, what does it mean to be an adventurer, to go on an adventure?
well, I had a friend who used to say, adventure is doing something that you wish you were home talking about.
Great line. Great line.
But you know, it can still be, it doesn't have to be terrifying all the time. You know, when I'm up on an 8,000-foot mountain pass with my family and we decide to take off and hike up some little peak with no trail, and we just take a little day pack and we get a little bit turned around and we end up on some kind of sketchy ledges, and it's, you know, it's adventurous in a different way. It's not hanging on the side of El Capitan, but it's still adventure. What my kids are doing in the Brooks Range in Alaska right now is adventure. So,
Yeah. Roald Amundsen said, "Adventure is nothing more than bad planning," which I always liked as a great line as well. But I love that line that you talk about, wishing being at home and talking about it. 'Cause
Yeah.
that is so true, and I think it's one of the beautiful things at the club, because everybody's got stories to talk about and their adventure and stuff. So
yeah, if you're in pain and you're scared, it must be an adventure. You know?
Exactly. So on that note, I want to make sure we have time for people to ask questions. So let's go to the audience and see who has questions.
I'm going to start, so I've got the mic. I'm curious, when the ledge dumped you out, you saved your sleeping bag, did you lose anything else? Was there anything else that was tumbling out of your ledge?
Not that I recall. We do occasionally drop things, you know, a small piece of equipment, but in that particular moment, I remember being just instantly terrified that I was going to lose my sleeping bag. But I didn't lose anything that I can recall in that moment.
Except your sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite a process to get back up, to reestablish the ledge and get it put back together and climb back onto it.
In pitch black at night,
Yeah,
too, right?
yeah. We had headlamps, but they were more primitive than headlamps are now. But
Questions?
Anybody have any questions?
In the back here.
A question about fall arrest. Were you always on fall arrest? Did you ever make a 6-meter fall on your belay?
yeah, in fact, I took on the Pacific Ocean Wall, which at the time was considered the second most difficult aid wall in the world. We did an early ascent of the Pacific Ocean Wall, and we did it faster. The fastest time it had been done in was 6 days, and myself and a Canadian and a New Zealander did it in 4 days flat. And there was one pitch where I pulled out a couple pieces of equipment, and I took 2 60-foot falls in a row on the same pitch. So yeah, that was 2 of my longest falls came on the same pitch of rock climbing.
You said that you mentioned that you grew up in Native American villages. Did you actually learn to speak any of the indigenous languages? Or?
No, not in any way that I would, you know, we had words, short words or phrases that we used, but I didn't live with any particular indigenous group long enough to master the language.
So it strikes me that to be an extreme rock climber like this, you have to be pretty flexible. I'm curious what kinds of things you do to sort of cross-train to prepare for these precarious bodily movements.
Well, that's another. I've heard rock climbing referred to as vertical yoga, and so but the only way that I trained for it was by doing it all the time. When I was pursuing it the hardest, I probably did it between 150 and 200 days a year. So
You didn't have a fingerboard at your house or anything like that?
No, we did, we did pull-up bars and we had fingerboards in camp and stuff, but I don't recall ever taking it really seriously. We were really busy, like, what wall are we going to climb next,
So I want to ask about, in your role as a survival instructor or just climbing instructor, the trade-off of ego and confidence, which you need to get into these situations, but too much of it will make you do stupid things and kick your butt. But especially trying to train someone who's an F-15 pilot, who's very confident in one area, it's really easy to get out of your lane in another area. So how should we balance tame the ego while riding it at the same time? Does that make any sense?
Well, I think as a youngster, I think I was humbled enough times by my own ignorance in a particular pursuit that I think I sort of maintained a balance about what was okay to be big-headed about or not. Like, I have met climbers who I just thought were really egotistical and it seemed out of place to me, although on one hand, they've earned the right to be sort of cocky about something, but on the other hand, I felt like I needed to maintain some humility. For example, when I was teaching survival, we had a team of Navy SEALs that came to us for Arctic survival training in the wintertime. And they were some of the cockiest guys that I had ever met, and they just acted like they didn't want to hear anything we had to say. But fortunately for us, as the survival instructors, the temperatures plummeted to -30 in the mountains up on the Canadian border that week. And so in ways that we didn't humble them, the environment did,
All right. Well, thank you very much. This was fantastic. We really appreciate it. And come back anytime and tell us more stories.
Thank you very much. I really appreciated it.
I'll let you do your thing.
All right, Bruce, if you'll meet me at the map here, we have a certificate for you. This says, expressing grateful appreciation to Bruce Birchell for the interesting, informative, entertaining program. Adventure is a state of mind. The evening of Thursday, September 5th, 2024, thus furthering the objectives of promoting the exchange and dissemination of knowledge between those who've had adventures off the beaten path. Thank you for joining us,
Thank
Bruce.
you very much. Appreciate it.